Today we, Bez Hashem, look forward to concluding the 23rd chapters. I believe there was, believe this is the 6th or 7th class on it. It's a lengthy period, though very fundamental, very basic. If you remember, we were holding on Umizeh Yochel Hamaskil Lahamshich Allah, which is in the original text 4 lines on the bottom of page Chav Tes, and you could see it in its corresponding place in the English text. And what Al Rebbe is saying, basically based on what we learned in the past class and even few classes, about the great virtue of learning Torah, or what learning Torah is all about, what transpires when a Yid learns Torah, and what he connects to. As we said, this is the level of Sovav Kalam. We're not going to elaborate over here because we've done much in the previous classes, which you could always go back and find it on Kosher Tube, as well as .com, as well as TanyaOnline.com, with the advantage of TanyaOnline.com clearly divided and namely with the text. So we're holding Umizeh, and from this, based on all this which we learned, Yuchal Hamaskil Laham Shechalav Yiruk, the understander, the intellect, the intellectual, could draw upon himself great fear, ba'aske b'teira, literally translated ba'aske b'teira, when he occupies himself with learning Torah, k'shiyis beinin, when he ponders on this, which transpires when he learns Torah, again elaborated in the previous classes, in the previous weeks, but he recaps over here, what happens is that his soul, uvushel, and the garments of the soul, which is in his brain, and in his mouth, which this is the part of the nefesh which learns Torah. The nefesh has many components to it. The nefesh expresses itself in understanding, in feeling, and in other ways throughout the entire system of the person. It gives the koach to everything, the eye to see, the ear to hear, and so on. But when a person learns Torah, it's the way the nefesh comes and expresses itself by his moach, his intellect. And as well, befiv, the Alter Rebbe depicts over here the one garment which is associated with Limud Torah. We know there's the 3 garments explained in the past, and namely elaborated in the beginning of chapter 4. So when a person learns Torah, what is involved, which part of his nefesh is involved? His intellect, his meiche. And which part of his garment? Befiv, and with his mouth. He utters the words of Torah, which is the original or the ideal way of learning Torah, based on the Gemara Chaim Heim L'Meitzei and the Beth, that we verbalize the words of Torah. That's a complete way of learning Torah. So when a person learns Torah, his nefesh, the garment, yuchadim, which is in his intellect, in his brain, and his mouth, yuchadim mamosh, they are completely one, betachlus hayichud, with the ultimate unity, beratzon ha'elyin, in the supreme desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, va'erein sof Baruch Hu, the infinite light of Hashem, blessed be He. And again, you're dealing with true infinity, because you're dealing with the level of Sovav Kalalmin, as we explained, Namizgala Bahem, which is revealed in the Moach and in the Peh, in the Nefesh, which is in the Moach and the Peh. Mashakol, and this level of revelation, Mashakol ha'olam esaliyeinim etachdeinim, kilei chashivi kamei, that all the worlds, may it be the supreme worlds, or the inferior worlds, killah, are completely insignificant in the face of this revelation, which is revealed and enters and becomes part of the nefesh of the person which learns Torah. So with this we can understand mizeh. We can understand the one who learns Torah, the maskil, the one who perceives which is actually happening. When the person learns Torah, he draws upon himself yira, fear of Hashem, but more so yira gdela, great, enormous, big, gadol, literally big, great, grand fear of Hashem, because you imagine someone telling somebody you're going to have a visit into Gan Eden for a few moments. He'll definitely wrap himself immediately, spontaneously, with enormous yira, fear and awe and reverence for this experience of Gan Eden. So when you learn Torah, the level of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to which you connect to by learning Torah is way infinite, way greater and way more transcendent, and infinitely greater, and infinitely more transcendent than the revelation which not only enters into certain levels in Gan Eden, which comprises the entire Gan Eden. How much more so when one opens a Gemara or a Mishnayos, what kind of expression of fear would engulf him, would surround him, or permeate into his whole mitzias, into his whole being. He's standing in front of the Eir Ein Sof. He can not only standing in front, but he connects, he becomes one with this level of godliness, which is, again, as we explained in the previous weeks, he puts in a few words, that all the Eilam Misalyenim, and the entire, all worlds, even Elam Hazid, you think about the enormous energy which invests into this world, which we still can't and will never be able to really understand the diversities and namely the complexities which are associated with the creation of this Eilam, but we can understand the enormous energy which enters into this Eilam. It's just a completely kilach hashiv. Again, I'm just throwing over here a few tidbits of this which we have learned in the previous weeks, which again, if you're picking up from here, it's very important and you understand this. We pretty much elaborated on this even in the last class, that this is just a small stream of light in comparison. It's like 1 teaspoon of the Mediterranean in comparison to the whole Mediterranean, or 1 bream of light which creates Olam Haza. How much more so when you're dealing this, and not only one Olam, Olamot, plural, and not only a Tachtein, but Olamot Elyonim. And we stuck to that, where we pretty much focus on an example. When we think about Olam Elyon, we think about Gan Eden. So the entire, not only a particular revelation to a particular tzaddik in Gan Eden, but the entire creation of Gan Eden naturally contains within itself, comes from a certain energy of Hashem, because Gan Eden is a Eilam, which the Ziva Shechina, the ray of the Shechina, is completely manifest. So therefore it's certainly an enormous expression of, or a extension, an investment of Hashem's energy, but this energy is in comparison to the way Hashem is for himself, by himself, the Soviv Kol Almin, is very minutiae and very little and very minimal, like a small stream of light which creates the entire Gan Eden. And the example which is given, we just gave, and Rabbi writes in other places, and Tanya doesn't mention this example, but in Nukutei Torah a number of times, it's like 1 drop of the Mediterranean in comparison to the entire Mediterranean. You're learning Torah, you're connecting to the entire Mediterranean, the Hashem himself, while the whole experience of Gan Eden is just a small beam and a small ray, and it's called Ziv HaShechina, and it is no comparison to the extent that the Gan Eden could have not been created from this energy of the Eir Ein Sof itself. The Eir Ein Sof, the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, had to be contracted and condensed, tzimtzumim macharit tzimtzumim, infinite amounts of contractions, in order that Gan Eden should be created. Because in the end of the day, Gan Eden is an olam. It's a world. As we even added Olam Alashon Hel and Vehesed. And the Eir Ein Sof is transcendent of all that. So if someone was told him he has a pass to Gan Eden for a particular day, for a certain hour, certainly he would completely be a different person. He would be completely wrapped with a yira, which not only usually wrap means all about him would be of that expression of reverence and awe for that experience in Gan Eden. How much more so when we're dealing with a level which is way infinitely greater than the Giluyim, the revelation of Gan Eden. How much more so does one have to connect, or better said, does one have to draw upon himself a yira gdela, an enormous amount of fear and reverence to the experience, or to this level which he's connecting to via his learning Torah. Because again, this is a revelation which is way greater than all the Eilam Misalyenim, that the Eilam Misalyenim and Tachteinim are completely insignificant in comparison to this revelation. Ka'ayin ve'efes mamish, as we continue in the text, it's completely like ayin, means nothing is no thing at all. These Eilamis in the face of this revelation of this Ein Sof, it is such a great and lofty revelation that it does not invest in these Eilamis, in these worlds, because this is a way to bright and superior type of light that cannot connect and that cannot invest in an Eilam which is Madadu Mugbal, any Eilam which is measured and limited and associated with finitude and so on. May it be the highest Eilam. In the end of the day, it's an Eilam. And this, here you're dealing with the Ein Sof Mamash, the infinite light of Hashem, the way He is. So the Eilamis Hashem cannot invest this great light into Eilamis. Elaseviv Kol Almin Bibchinas Makif. It's just a type of a connection to Olamot in a way of Sovev, hovers over them. Makif also is an expression of surrounding Lachyesam, Iker Chayusam, to give their life and their main vitality. And we explained, we elaborated on this as well last week. We're not going to do this again because we took much time. As we said, it's not that Seviv does not mean that we quoted from the Alter Rebbe, but he writes in Perek Memches, the 48th chapter, that Sovev doesn't mean he just surrounds. Sovev means that he doesn't invest in a way that you can see, or you can see the connection between this level which invests to the Olam in which he invests in. We gave the example of a generator. A generator does not come in, or you don't plug your electrical appliance into a generator. It just wouldn't work. It would be too strong. It would probably explode. So the generator has to be makif. It's away from the area where you're functioning your electrical appliances. You're working with your electrical appliances, with your home, your domain, where you are. The generator is usually chutz la'ir, out of society, because it's what the generator is. It's not fit on its own to deal with the details or the particular minimal energy which has to invest in that electrical appliance. It stands away because it's too powerful, it's too potent. So it stands away from everything, but in the end of the day, it is the energy of everything. Like we said, if it's too strong, so what do I need? Someone's going to say, what do I need? The generator. In the end of the day, I need the energy which flows through the wirings and this contracted level of energy which ultimately ends up in the outlet, the wire in the outlet of my home. And that's the way my electrical appliance could work when I plug it into theirs, opposed if I plug it into the generator. So who needs the generator? It's a silly thing to say, because the energy, the generator is the Iker Chayus, is, as expressed over here, Iker Chayusam. There's no other energy other than the generator. There is no other energy other than the generator. And the outlet doesn't give energy. The outlet contracts the energy of the generator in order to fit to the needs of that specific electrical appliance. So the generator stays away from the details. And similarly, obviously, when you're dealing with an olam, any world, even olam hazeh tachton, even this physical world, there's no other energy other than God, or this Ein Sof which he deals with. But the only difference is that the Ein Sof doesn't invest into this olam. It's too strong, it's too powerful. It's like the generator. You bring the generator into your home and try to plug the these appliances into it. It just won't work. They will expire. So the generator, in order to give its chayes, it has to stay away. Similarly, this level of Sovev Kalam which we're dealing with, which a Yid connects to when he learns Torah, must stay in a way of Sovev Kol Almin. It doesn't enter into Olamot, even though it's the Iker Chayusam, Lachiyosam, Iker Chayusam. The Olamot don't have any other energy other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Sovev Kol Almin, the way he himself, for himself, by himself, he is the generator, he is the Iker life, but he doesn't invest. The only thing is, and therefore his connection to Almin, any level of Eilam, may it be Eilam Hazeh or Gan Eden, is in a way of Sevev, Makif. Again, it doesn't mean physically, quite on the contrary. It's everything about them is this level of Sevev, but it doesn't connect in a overt, revealed way and deals with the Tachton or the Olam the way it is, because the Olam and Ein Sof, you can't think of two things which are so antithetical one to the other. This is the brightness of Ein Sof, and this is a olam, Melashon Helam V'Hester, which means it's concealed, and it has in any level of olam, maybe even the highest level of olamot, even olam like Gan Eden. In the end of the day, it's an olam which has its compartments and has its limitation. Obviously, you cannot compare the limitations of Gan Eden to the limitations of this physical world, which is completely limited and defined with basically with zman, mokim, time, place, today, tomorrow, the day after, past, present, future, here, there, the true hakbala, true limitation. Infinitude is really found in this physical world, as opposed to the spiritual world, or the more the world on a higher spiritual level, or a world which is on a higher spiritual level, like we say Gan Eden, in comparison to Elam Hazatachn, the Hagbalas, the limitations of time and place, fade away naturally. But in the end of the day, it's still an Elam with its own type of Hagbalas. Every tzaddik has his compartment, a revelation to this tzaddik and a revelation to another yid, and a revelation to millions and hundreds of millions of yidden over all generations. And every yid has its particular share in the world to come. So there's a certain hakbalas, and that's why they could be nene, as the famous as one of the clear expressions and explanations of the Alter Rebbe, and these very prakim in the mems in the area of this 40th chapter which you just mentioned is, or in the end of the 30th to 30 chapters, Lamed Ches, so when he explains there that the reason why the neshama or the malach can have have pleasure from the Ziv HaShekhinah, it's only for the reason because it's mugwal, because it's an air which is mugwal, which is limited. That's why you can have if it's an infinite light, you would consume into the infinite light. You wouldn't have you wouldn't have pleasure. And we say tzaddik miyoshvim and neni Ziv HaShekhinah, that itself is enough to say, suffice to say that it's a limited air. As opposed to this air of the Ein Sof, it's infinite. It's Ein Sof as it sounds. It is in an infinite light. Therefore, essentially it is the only creation. But if you can't think of anything as opposite as an Olam and the Ein Sof, therefore the Ein Sof does not invest in the Olam. It stands in a way of Sovev Kol Almin. It's just Rakeza Ha'ora, just a small beam of light. From this Sovev Kol Almin, Mislabeshes B'Sechem invests in these Eilamis, Mashiach Lisbail, that the Eilamis, these worlds should be able to contain themselves. They should be completely, they should not be annulled completely into this Ein Sof. They should not expire. A little of light we could appreciate. If it's a bright light, if it's too bright, we consume, we don't appreciate it. We cannot have any pleasure of it. And if it's very bright, the person could consume into it, completely expire. And that is this is why this is tantamount to this which the Alter Rebbe mentions a few times in the Torah, that all the Eilamis, you're dealing with the Ein Sof, so all the Eilamis receive a very small, measured energy and light from the Ein Sof, and this is the mashal, which is tifo achas, one drop of the entire Mediterranean. So in this context, the Eilam Alienim, Gan Eden would be that drop. All the Eilamis, this world, all the Eilamis, and Gan Eden, again, we use the expression of Gan Eden, there's many Eilamis, even in Gan Eden itself, Gan Eden and Gan Eden Elin, and in Gan Eden itself there's many levels. But we know it Gan Eden as a spiritual Eilam, so we use, in this class we focus many times on this Gan Eden. In the end of the day, all this comes from one little drop. One little ha'ara, one drop of the Mediterranean, the whole entire Mediterranean. That's the Ein Sof in the Nimshal. In this is again a mashal. There's a parable to this, which we said over here. Even though again in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe doesn't say this mashal, but it is this mashal, which is this parable, which is given multiple times in the Torah. It gives us a certain sense of clarity that it's not just Gan Eden is a little bit less than the Ein Sof, which is experienced on the level to which a yid connects to when he learns Torah. We're dealing with one drop in comparison to how many drops are there in the Mediterranean. We can't count. We could never know. So this is the whole package of the Ein Sof in comparison to one Ha'ara, which creates all the worlds, including Gan Eden, Gan Eden Elin. The Ein Sof itself is found in Torah. The package, the essence of God, the infinite God, the way Hashem has formed himself by himself prior, like the entire Mediterranean, prior to coming through with the stream of light, which creates all these elements, it's all in Torah. Could you imagine what kind of year a person should embrace himself with and draw upon himself when he sits down in front of a mission and starts learning Torah? Now, let's understand that we're not talking something external to draw upon. A person if a person's going to stand up in a Gemara and he's going to start trembling, he'll never understand what the Gemara is saying. And Torah has to be learned in a way that not we open a Gemara and say, oh, this is the Ein Sof. There I come close. So Teda itself, interestingly, this has this dichotomy. On one hand, Teda is Seichel, and when you open a Gemara, you have to understand what the Gemara is saying, and Rashi is saying, and Tais is saying thoroughly. Hence, you have to put your Seichel to it. And if you put your Seichel to it, in a sense, the investment of Seichel, that itself wears away any expression of reverence and trembling or overt awe. Because you have to put your seichel, you have to understand exactly what the Gemara is saying. But, and therefore, chas v'shalom, a person should say, oh, if it's Ein Sof, how can I just really put my brain to it? I will just stand with a bittul, like I stand in front of Shimon Aisenbach, and I stand in Shimon Aisenbach with a complete expression of self-nullification. If you start understanding, putting my brain to it, to understand what the Gemara says, a person's going to say chas v'shalom, it's Ein Sof. Well, that's completely in error. That's erroneous to say so, because Teda is a chachmasi shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Eibishter decided that he's going to put himself into Teda, and David Hashem says that Teda is chachmaschem ubinascha. It is about seichel, and is it about it's primarily. In other words, our approach to Teda is that I'm going to understand it, and the more you understand it, the more you connect it to Kedushas HaTeda. For if you open a Gemara and you read through the entire page of Gemara, or you hear someone else reading through the page of the Gemara, and you don't understand, you don't understand what the Gemara is saying, you didn't even come into the arena. You don't fulfill the mitzvah of Limud HaTorah. On simple terms, Limud HaTorah must be that I understand what I'm learning, and therefore the more I understand and the more I deal with. Remember, the Gemara says that Rabbi Akiva, Al kol kaitz v'kaitz, he extracted tilei tilin shel halachas, mountains and hills of halachas, because the whole approach, again, it has this dichotomy. In one hand, you have to put your seichel to it, and it was leave alone any other external expression. May it even be an emotional expression in the context of reverence to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, it should not contradict my complete intellectual investment in this Gemara, Rashi, or Taisus, or anything else what I'm learning. And to understand it to the exact detail, that Rashi has to shine, and on one word and on one letter should be extra. Because usually when words are extra, it means I don't understand it thoroughly. And if I learn a Gemara, if I really Mekayim the mitzvah in Talmud Torah, I must learn it, I must understand it thoroughly. But together with that, to know deep down what arena, what area I'm at, what connection, what I'm connecting to, and what level of God I'm connecting to. I'm connecting to the core essence of Hashem, the Ein Sof Mamash. So together with that, intellectual investment in the learning, together with that, in unison with that, and simultaneous to that, I know what I'm connecting to, so automatically, spontaneously, or automatically, be better said, I'm engulfed with this yira, not only yira, but yira gdela, with this great fear, which I draw upon myself, just focusing on what level of HaKadosh Baruch Hu I'm connecting to, a level which Gan Eden cannot be created from that level of Elokus. It's too potent to even create an Elam like Gan Eden, and that's what I'm connecting to when I'm learning Torah. So this is it, with just understanding that itself again allows me, or it draws me to, or draw upon myself. To draw upon myself Yira Gdela, understanding what it is. I mamshich upon myself. I draw upon myself this great fear. This is what the pasuk says, that Hashem commanded us all these chukim, these statutes, in order to fear HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So, what does this mean? As kol chukim liyiras Hashem, the Alter Rebbe explained. But once we know what the chukim ha'ele are, consequently, liyiras Hashem would bring me to great level of yira. And Bal Yira Gdela, the Rebbe adds in this brackets, Bal Yira Gdela, Zu Amru Meint Chachmei in Yira. And in this great Yira, it says if there's no wisdom, there's no fear. The famous says, it's brought, as the Mishnah says, if there's no fear, there is no wisdom. And if there's no wisdom, there's no fear. So which one do you start with? Every one you're going to start with, you said it has to be it's preconditioned with the other. If you say Mein Chachmei and Yira, so you have to start with Chachma. When you say Mein Yira and Chachma, so you have to start with Yira. So it says in a number of places to explain, to translate as an answer, in reconciliation with this Mishnah, that there's different levels of Yira and there's different levels of Chachma. You need to go to the first Yira in order to come to Chachma. But there is the Chachma, Mein Chachmei and Yira, when you enter into Chachma, in this context of the Chachmas HaTorah, understanding what is transpiring when you're learning Torah, that leads you to the Yira. So this is what it says. In this type of great yira, this is a main chachma in yira. First comes chachma, which is the chachma satera, as well understanding what is happening, what level I'm connecting to when I learn Torah. That in yira, you cannot get to that yira. Because in order to experience that yira, you have to engage into that yira g'dayla. In other words, this great yira, not the yira tata, the lower level of yira, which is a precondition to learning Torah. You're dealing with the chachmas hatayra, which leads to this yira g'dayla, based on everything we said before. And Vatayra nikras etzla tara ladarta. Torah is called a gateway to this world of yira, to this domain of yira. I believe Tara is a gateway. Or as you can look in the English translation, or a ladder. I believe Tara is Moshe Shar. In Aramaic, it's a gateway to this yira. Limud Torah is the condition, is the gateway in order to enter into this year. Again, based on what we said. Understandably, not every brain could comprehend, could tolerate such a great yira. Each one to its own. And when we understand it, obviously, because you're dealing with a feeling based on a certain perception, and we all perceive things a bit different one than the other. Ein deyoten shavas, our understanding, our knowledge are different. Our knowledge, our expressions of knowledge, or our levels of knowledge are different one each other. Hence, this yira will be expressed each one different than the other. And there's certain people, if you think about it, not every mind. If you think about it ideally and conceptually, this can cause, expiration on its own. If you realize what happens when you're learning Torah, this yira could be something that we couldn't on its own merit not tolerate and not be able to comprehend. And he says clearly, not every brain could tolerate or comprehend this yira. Even somebody whose brain doesn't have the capacity to tolerate this level of yira, not even a bit of it, not from it and not even a bit of it. And one of the reasons, which the Alter Rebbe alluded to this in a different chapter, in a different context, but here also the Alter Rebbe says, in the end of the day, our connection to God, to engaging in these godly experiences, a lot of it is based on where we originate and come from. We know that every nefesh comes from the 10 spheres of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as Alter Rebbe begins in the beginning of the third chapter. But there are, in the second chapter, the Alter Rebbe elaborates on this, that we know that there are different neshames and different levels of neshames, as we explained and expounded on this tremendously when we were learning the second chapter, and even later when we came to this, we came across this idea as well. But it's very clear. We'll take the two extremes just to understand what the Alter Rebbe is mentioning over here, and what he explained in these above mentioned chapters, and what he's getting at over here in this context is, take for example Moshe Rabbeinu, and take a regular Yid in this generation. We both have neshamis, but no one can ever compare themselves to Moshe Rabbeinu, not only because of Moshe Rabbeinu's mandate and what he accomplished and who he was as a Rabbeinu, as a Rebbe, but if you look in simple Pshuta Shel Mikra, in the simple taich, in the simple meaning of different anecdotes or different incidences which Torah deals with. Take for example, we used it, one of the classic examples, the Jewish people had to find out about a certain mitzvah, or they were complaining. They said they also want to sacrifice the Korban Pesach. They didn't have the ability to do so because they were impure. Torah Moshe, they go over to Moshe Rabbeinu and says it's not fair, and eventually, as we know, because of them, there was a new mitzvah was given. In other words, it was there, it was in storage, but it came to state of manifestation through the determination of the Jewish people who wanted to be makriv. They couldn't see themselves overgoing the opportunity of sacrificing the Korban Pesach. So in the end, they prevail. Okay, we're not going to the whole mitzvah of Korban Pesach Sheni. It was there in storage, but Hashem was waiting for them to demonstrate their determination. But when they came over to Moshe, Moshe Rabbeinu said, hold on a moment, let me just turn around and ask God if it makes sense that we should give you another chance. And Rashi says, Ashrei Yilud Isha. Fortunate is somebody who is born in the same way any other human being was born, and yet he's so in tune to the divine that he just turns and asks Hashem within a few seconds, and even less than that, he comes back and he says, yes, my friends, you have a Korban Pesach Sheni, which is waiting for you to be makriv in another 30 days, or in the Yudalit, in the 14th day of Iyar. In other words, someone like Moshe Rabbeinu from the very beginning, and that's why he was Moshe Rabbeinu, he was completely sensitive to the divine. He was somebody who lived in this physical world, yet in the same token, somebody who was in tune to the divine reality on a constant basis. For that matter, it was even when he was born. It says, Rashi says that the whole house it was illuminated as a result of the little baby Moshe Rabbeinu, because Moshe Rabbeinu, as he was in a physical body, he was completely in tune and online with the divine reality, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is again, that's what Moshe Kibbutz Tatum Messina. But I said this story because you see Rashi picks up and it says, oh, fortunate is the one, somebody who was a Yelud Isha, that he could ask Hashem within seconds and receive an answer. Because Moshe Rabbeinu, as he has his 2 feet on the ground, he is Isha Elikim, as opposed to a regular Yid. Every Yid has a neshama. Every single Yid has a neshama. And we could find our connection, our sensitivity to the divine, and our relationship with the divine. And we ought to do so. That's the point of Torah, mitzvahs, like he says, to express time and again our connection, our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But you can't compare the toil where we take an average human being as opposed to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as opposed to Moshe Rabbeinu. The obligations we both have. Every year, together with Moshe Rabbeinu, to put on tefillin, to learn Torah, and so on. But the transparent and the overt connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it takes an average person to toil to uncover that. And the reason for this is, as the Alter Rebbe mentions in the 2nd chapter, even though there's one God, and the virtue of the Yid Al-Kol over other nations is because he has a chelik al-kamimal, he has a part of God within himself. And if there's one God, apparently should only be one level of neshamas. So why is there a difference between Moshe Rabbeinu or a great tzaddik? Again, we're using an example of two extremes of Moshe Rabbeinu and the average Yid. And the answer is because the neshama, from where it initiates, is Chochmei La, which is the highest level of these 4 olamis, Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, Asiya, as it travels, and as it makes its way through to the one olam after another olam, the average neshama is impacted by these other levels of these olamot. And again, I advise you to look into the 2nd chapter. You can find it on TanyaOnline.com. It's clearly divided and compartmentalized, the entire site. And you could find the 2nd chapter, Perek Beis, which the Alter Rebbe deals with it. And we again took the time then to expand on this concept, as the Alter Rebbe does there. But here, the Alter Rebbe, as opposed, so when the average neshama is impacted by as it journeys through all these levels till it ends up into this physical world. Why the neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu, the way he begins, the way he begins is Chochmei La, the supreme wisdom of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the highest level, which is the world of Atzilus. Even he travels, he journeys, and till he comes into this physical world, he's not impacted by the entire journey at all. And as he begins Chochmei La, Moshe Rabbeinu ends up being Isha Likim, Tefillah L'Moshe Isha Likim, a godly person down here in this physical world. And very briefly, I'm just going to mention this, even though again I just sent you the 2nd chapter, you can see it there on your own. But Alter Rebbe gives one example, we're going to mention it and determined to do this brief over here. When you're dealing with the development of a person in an original state, it's all the same. But as it develops in the womb, the 9 months in the womb of the mother, then there are differences in the fetus. This part of the fetus is a brain, and this part of the fetus could be another vital organ like a heart or a liver, and then this part eventually of the original state, semen, it eventually becomes a nail or a toe or a toenail. And I say nail because it's almost lifeless. When you cut it, it doesn't hurt. Or a hair, which is even less lifeless. There is energy flowing through the hair. It'll constantly grow till you cut it. But it doesn't hurt when you cut it. It's because it ended up being, it's all part of the same structure of the fetus, but the original state, the semen of the original state, when it was equal on the onset, through the development of the 9 months in the womb of the mother, that same energy divided itself, and certain parts of it, and naturally it comes from a very vital organ, where it originates from, as we all know. But and so that as it develops in the womb of the mother, these 9 months, there's certain parts of the fetus remain a vital organ. You look at the brain of the child, it is very similar to where this originally semen came from. Came from the brain, as a koach mochi, a koach of mayach, as we know. And in the end, as it goes through and it develops the same, it sits in the same development of these 9 months of the womb of the mother, it doesn't change, it remains brain. As opposed to other parts of it have a profound impact as it develops in the 9 months in the womb of the mother, to the extent that it becomes a inferior limb, or it becomes even it develops into something which is almost lifeless, like a nail or hair. And again, you could look there, as we explained it, and we just try to find the nimshal in this mashal, in this parable. But here the Alter Rebbe says the same thing. One of the reasons why a person could learn Torah, or even learn this perek and understand what is happening when he learns Torah, not necessarily will he gain that fear, that awe, that reverence to HaKadosh Baruch Hu like another Yid. And the reason is because he was more impacted by these lower levels of these lower worlds till his neshama ended up being in Elam Hazeh. Moshe Rabbeinu Batei Siki Tov, like Rashi says, right when he was born, the entire home was bright, because Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama, as he begins Chachmei Allah, the brain Kaviyachal of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, on the highest levels, those highest, most profound levels, despite he goes through the 4 olamot, Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, Asir, and this Elit, Esses, Spheres, the 10 spheres with all the olamot, something like the brain of the child. It began brain, and it ended up brain. Tefillah l'Moshe, Isha Likim rather. Moshe Rabbeinu is an Isha Likim, and from the very first day he was born. And later it was just developed. A man which is walking 120 years on this earth, and yet he's completely in tune and aligned and sensitive to divine in every step of his life. As opposed to others, we all come from the same place. The only thing is, as he says over here, where his neshama was impacted from a lower level of these 4 olamot, and therefore it was impacted, doesn't maintain that purity of the original state of the Chachmei Allah, the supreme Chachma of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with all the neshamas are carved from, initiate from, and therefore when it comes to appreciating such a level of yira, not necessarily he can appreciate it, or he can comprehend, or he could express that yira in its full sense of that emotional experience of yira, rather, like somebody who is much more in tuned and sensitive to the divine. And the reason for this is, again, it's not something that he has done, it's the whole makeup where he comes from. We did make it very clear that at any level of Yid, if you're a Moshe Rabbeinu, or if you're somebody who was impacted, and therefore you're less sensitive, naturally, we say naturally less sensitive to the divine, it doesn't take away from our obligations. No one could say, maybe I come from this and this level, or I was impacted from a lower level, even though I have a neshama. Like again, every part of this fetus comes from the original semen. Every Yid originally comes from Chachmasei Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and has a chelik kamimal, a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu within him. The question is how much he was impacted, which makes him again less sensitive to the divine. But no one could say, if that's the case, maybe I'm not really so obligated on all these mitzvahs like somebody who like Moshe Rabbeinu is obligated. That's nonsense. And the onset, it's nonsense. So first of all, how do you know what level you come from? Or how do you know that you as a neshama, beguf, invested in a body, maybe you were less impacted, not necessarily like Moshe Rabbeinu, but there's tens and hundreds of thousands of different levels till the neshama comes down to this world. How do you know? Number one, even if you did know, and if you're sure that you were impacted by the lower level, like it says, Madrigas Tachtona to Esesfiris Dasiya, which is Asiya is the lowest of the 4 worlds, Atzilus Bri Yitzir Asiya. Even if you're certain, it has nothing to do with your obligation to Torah mitzvahs, the way it says in Shulchan Aruch. It's incumbent upon every single Yid to follow Shulchan Aruch to the T, 100%. Here we're dealing with an emotional expression. a yira, a feeling of my perception of what's transpiring when I'm learning Torah. So the Alter Rebbe makes it clear, even somebody who cannot capacitate, that cannot contain this great yira, it does not prevent him from pursuing the learning Torah with diligence and excitement and just the enthusiasm. First and foremost, because we are commanded to do so. Limud HaTorah is a mitzvah, and more so, v'talmud Torah keneged kulam, it is the greatest mitzvah of all mitzvahs, and more so, to some degree, we can appreciate this what Torah is all about, and to some degree we could develop within ourselves this feeling, this sensation, or more so yira, this fear, this reverence to the Torah which we're learning. But even if you did not experience the yira the way it essentially or conceptually or ideally ought to be experienced, because you're dealing with a yira g'dayla, just understanding what level you're connecting to, which is again Seviv Kol Almin. You're talking about the true Gdula of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Prior to investing into Elamis, this is the true Gdula. So if you didn't reach that level, don't worry about it. Doesn't mean Makevis L'Maisa, continue learning. On some degree, inevitably, you just have to learn this Perek Tanya, understand the different what's happening when you're learning Torah. But if you didn't experience in its complete measure, it's not Makevis L'Maisa. You just continue learning Torah, again, namely because we're commanded to learn Torah, and as well, we can appreciate some type of appreciation we can have to this level, to this what level we're connecting to via learning this Torah, like it'll be explained later. Have a wonderful night.